more, right? Because I think at the end of the day, Web3 is here to stay. I'm 100% Web3 is here to stay. If not, I would cut my dick off, right? I think this is definitely here to stay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
GM, everybody.
GM, how's everyone doing out there this morning? We're so excited to be here. What are the ABCs of the GM show, though, Karen?
Yeah, let's go. So the show is about Asia-focused, builder-friendly, and cool vibes, only powered by Memeland, home of Captain's Potatoes, Steakland, and you, the real MVP. My name is Karen, and I'm your co-host as well, head of social for Memeland.
Yeah. And everybody knows I'm Casey, and I'm a Web3 community builder, investor, and we love talking to founders and builders about Web3. What are they doing, especially in Asia, but also Asian people around the world building and stuff. And as we go to all these conferences and we're on X, we just meet a lot of cool people. And we want to bring them out and show what they're working on. And so that's the main focus of the GM show. Okay, so before we begin, let's hear a quick word from our chairman.
What is discussed on the GM show is not investment advice. We may or may not have ownership interests in the projects we are talking about, but this is not investment advice in any way, shape, or form. And this is not Sir David Attenborough.
All right.
Cool. All right, so Karen, a while back, you did a panel at Fort about IP, right? You had Ray on there. You had some other people around Asia talking about IP rights and IP in Web3. Well, that's what this show is going to all be about. We have this very cool founder with this very cool product that we want him to talk to us more about. The thing is called Story Protocol, and they're making the legal system for creative intellectual property more efficient by turning IP programmable on the blockchain. That is creating an API-like system where people or programs alike can license, remix, and monetize IP according to transparent terms set by creators themselves. Creators can register their IP as IP assets on Story Protocol. They call them IPAs, not the beer, but IPA, and the foundational programming IP metadata on Story Protocol. Each IPA is consisted of an on-chain NFT. So this could be an existing NFT like a Zuki that itself is the IP, or a new NFT specifically minted to represent off-chain IP like a real-world asset. Before Story Protocol, if you wanted to create a comic book with someone else's Azuki NFT and your Pudgy Penguins NFT, you would need to hope the Azuki has a license and then find and contact the owner. You also need to research your license terms for your Pudgy. Since you're not a legal expert, hopefully you're not, you would probably need a lawyer to create all the new contracts between the two IPs. This creates a burden on everything and everybody, and nobody wants to pay lawyers, right? So let's get out of that. So IP is not easily composable. With Story Protocol, Azuki and Pudgy holders can register IP as IP assets and then set their own terms, outlining how people can license or remix their IP. If your Pudgy is registered on Story, anyone can see those terms claim on-chain and license your Pudgy automatically using the licensing module, which generates a real license agreement. You can then register the resulting comic as a derivative, and any revenue that flows can be distributed between you and the IP holders automatically. Wow, this is so interesting. Karen, who's our guest today?
He is the Chief Protocol Officer and co-founder of Story Protocol. He was previously a product manager at DeepMind, focused on productionizing Google's cutting edge artificial intelligence model across industrial and enterprise applications. He's also an active angel investor in frontier technology startups, and he served as the founding editor-in-chief of Stanford Rewired, a magazine focused on intersection of storytelling and technology. As a design fellow at IDEO, he created and taught a course at Stanford D School, and he received both Bachelor in Philosophy and Master's in
This guy
Computer
sounds too smart to be on the show.
Stanford University. Welcome to the GM show, Jason Zhao. Hello,
All right.
Jason.
That was an epic intro. Thanks, guys. Casey, you really said all the things I was going to say about stories. So
All right, we're done early.
did
See
fun
you next
stuff.
week, everyone.
We're done.
I've been following your company for a while. We are at Memeland. Of course, we have some incredible IP as well. IP rights is a big discussion. I think Pudgy's did an incredible way of licensing out their characters to toys and things through their own system. So very excited to have you on the show and talk and tell us a little bit more about what you're building. We ask the same 10 questions of each guest every week to get a little insight into your mind, how you're building, and maybe you can inspire some of the new founders and builders in the Web3 space. So Karen, let's start off, Jason, with the first question.
Sure. So let's start with some questions so people know more about you. What's the one app you have on your home screen that not many people do?
all right, I think I have a couple, but the one that I use the most is Goodreads. I'm not sure if you guys heard of Goodreads. It's like
We have.
really
And no one said that
old,
before either. That's great.
Super old looking social media, like basically Craigslist with a beige color skin. But I love Goodreads. It's like, to me, it's the vision of, it's not the sexiest vision of the internet, but it's one of the places on the internet that still feels like an original internet where people are there, not because of some algorithm, they're not there to get fed like vitriol or politics. It's just, you find out what other people are reading. You learn a lot about them. You write reviews. I think it's like a good vision. It feels kind of like a library, right? It feels like it actually has a sense of place and time, which is really nice. And so I really love Goodreads. I actually think you learn a lot more about someone seeing what they've read than like what they've tweeted, especially because Twitter and other platforms these days is so like mediated. So yeah, Goodreads is an app that I use pretty frequently.
How much time do you put into reviews on Goodreads as opposed to like reading other people's reviews?
I probably 50-50. Like most of the times I'm reading reviews, but obviously that doesn't take too much time. I used to have a goal of every book I read, I would review it. It like helps me remember it. It helps me like distill. If it's a good forcing function. Since starting Story, I honestly haven't had as much time to read books, so I haven't written as many reviews, but guess that's just trade-offs of being a founder.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, great first answer. Okay, second question. What is something that has greatly influenced your life? It could be an event when you were younger. It could be a book you read. It could be somebody who said something to your mentor, as you went along the way. You have a very interesting background, so I'm sure there's some fantastic influence in your life up to this point.
Yeah, for me, I think the most important event in my life was probably discovering philosophy. I think like a lot of teenagers, like this was in like late middle school, early high school. I think a lot of teenagers, pretty angsty. I felt very lucky. Like I kind of just stumbled upon some pretty interesting philosophy on the internet. I was reading a lot about Stoicism. I was getting into Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I read some Nietzsche. Probably don't read Nietzsche as a teenager. It's probably not the best thing to do. But I think that finding philosophy was really interesting because it kind of, for me, it wasn't like an intellectual exercise. It gave me like a lot of resources and frameworks to think about how to structure my life and, what is like a meaningful life? What is a good life? And so I thought that's what I studied in university. And that's kind of been like a lifelong passion of mine.
When I was a teenager, I was learning about the X-Men. So I can't believe that you were reading that stuff. Amazing.
That's great. So what is the best investment so far you've made, and what were the returns? Is it your time, your energy, your money, your energy starting up this company?
I would say the best investment it's twofold. Like it's always, I think the positive thing to invest in is always relationships. Like for me, the pivotal changes in my life have always been mentors or friends that I've made or random people on the internet who've really opened my eyes in the new ways. So I think it's always worth it to invest in people. And that's going to get you a lot further than like investing in other valuable things like skills, for example. Like obviously build up your skills, but the most important thing you can do is surround yourself with the best people, and the skills will take care of themselves because you're going to be around those people. I think the best investment you can make is also not investing in too many things at once, right? Like this is not financial. Like I think financially you might want to diversify, but like from a life perspective, like I think people want to do everything. And so they let like somewhat good things get in the way of great things. And so also like letting go of everything that's not super, super critical. I think that's also a great investment.
Just a follow up on that question. So you invest in people. When you start a business like a Story Protocol, where there's nobody teaching you how to do this, so you bank your hiring based on the people, or how do you like hire then from for something as unique as what you're building?
I think it's twofold. It's like even though building a company is doing something new, there's so like history is so rich, and I think there's a great Warren Buffett quote. I'm gonna butcher it, but basically the idea is like, people don't learn from the mistakes because the consistency and the type of mistakes that people make throughout histories is just so striking, right? Like people make the same mistakes over and over again. So I think like being a student of history and then also just learning from your investors, from other founders, from people who have done it before, it's like so much of a business is just not screwing up the simple things and surviving long enough to reach that critical insight. So instead of thinking about how can I 1000x a business every year, think about how you can survive another year so that all your competitors will die off and you can have another year to improve yourself. I think like sometimes the goal is survival and getting the basics right. And then the upside will take care of itself. And then also when thinking about hiring, like people often are so eager to rush to build a product really quickly. And that's great. Like that's kind of the YC playbook that makes sense. Yeah. But then they prioritize that over finding the right people. And the thing about like the first, let's say 5 or 10 people that you bring into your company, every one of those people are going to bring their people in, right? So it's like exponential. So the first person you hire, that person's responsible. Like, let's say you become 1,000-person company. That person's probably responsible for like 100 hires. Yeah. And so you better be spending like 99% of your time figuring out who the right person is rather than 10% of your time, right? So I think people overestimate the importance of shipping and underestimate the importance of hiring the right people. Obviously shipping is important, but sometimes it's actually, just doing that process of interviewing a billion candidates. And it feels horrible because like most of them don't fit the bar, or they don't want to work for you. And so I think, investing in people is really important, and even though it doesn't feel like you're moving forward all the time.
Yeah, great. Okay, so the next question is, who is someone you're inspired by and why?
Okay, I think I'll give you 2 different answers here, like different vibes. So the first is I've always liked people that were both doers and thinkers like throughout history. So a couple that come to mind are Cicero, who was like a Roman statesman and also a philosopher, and kind of like the Renaissance started due to the rediscovery of Cicero's work. So he's a great thinker and a doer. Also Ben Franklin, like a more modern example. I think, he was obviously a founding father, but he also started like many newspapers. He started the first library in the US, the first fire department. So he was just a very interesting person. So I've always liked the synthesis of the two. And then, in terms of like role models, I think like I'm a huge NBA fan. I love basketball. And so for me, it's like Michael Jordan and Kobe. I love like these competitors. I love people who have such a dedication to the craft. To me, that's very inspiring.
Yeah, very good.
Awesome. So this is kind of a hard question, but what is the one conventional wisdom that you disagree with?
There's a lot, but to me, the most I think that the most egregious mistake that people make is like overestimating the risk of doing something new, especially in startups. I mean, that's the one I'm most familiar with. I feel like at this stage, the risk of starting a company are extremely low. Like there is a very, very mature venture ecosystem. There are lots of playbooks on how to start a company. And I think, especially if you're younger, like you have so much time and you have like the ability to allocate it how you want. Like the risk of starting a company is very low because at the very least, you're going to learn a lot and you're going to have fun and have done something with cool people. I think it's much higher risk and part of this is what we're solving a story, but I think right now it's much higher risk, unfortunately, to like try to be a creator or try to make it as an actor in Hollywood, where, a lot of times you're spending 3 or 4 years like getting coffee for someone instead of building skills, right? And so for me, I think people really like, maybe it's just founders making themselves feel better, but like I actually don't think it's that high risk to be a founder. I think it's pretty low risk, and people should calculate that into
interesting. Good, interesting insight. Okay, so the next question now is, what is one piece of advice you'll give to a first-time founder? We're looking for like something in the Web3 space because it's what we're talking about, and I find it's changes so much. It's probably from when you started Story till today, you've learned a lot. So, what's something that you would want to give to a new founder coming into the space today?
Two things. So one is don't underestimate the power of distribution, and don't underestimate a founder's role in distribution. Don't try to hire a marketing person immediately. Like, that's not going to solve your problem. You are the voice of the brand. You're the voice of the company, and people want to hear from a face and not a logo. So I think that's very different in crypto compared to other companies where, you might be comfortable getting information from a company account. I think in crypto, people want to hear from the person. And it's just so important to dedicate so much of your time to crafting that message and being the voice, and not exaggerating, not like, I wouldn't even say it's selling. It's really about being a representative of what you find the most interesting about your company and the vision that you're building towards. So invest a lot of time in distribution. And then also, I would say invest a lot of time in understanding what's the reality of the market today and where you want to go, and not losing sight of either. Because I think sometimes, like, some companies are too idealistic and they're building for a customer that doesn't exist. And they're just, they have a very powerful vision, but they just don't meet the market where it's at. And then other founders are too pragmatic and they don't really move the space forward. And they're kind of just repeating the same patterns that sort of are short-term profitable or short-term successful, but they don't actually drive towards a longer-term vision that's sustainable and compelling.
Okay, great.
So I think that there are a lot of founders, or to-be founders, like, they want to know if they should have a co-founder or they should do this alone, or what's your take on that?
It's really hard to start a company alone. I've never done that. I don't think I could, to be honest. I think I'm very lucky to have the co-founders I do. Like, without them, I mean, part of it is just like, I think this is a Ben Horowitz quote, but the hardest part about starting a company, in my opinion, is managing your own psychology. And there's a great quote from a Roman Stoic, basically is like, would you have an empire? First rule over yourself. Like, so many people are focused on building a company, but they can't even manage their own emotions. And by far the hardest part of being a founder is like, you have to get yourself out of bed every morning. You have to feel passionate about what you do. Sometimes you're going to doubt yourself. Like, that's normal. And there's always going to be like a trough of despair. Right. And that you have to get through that. You have to believe in it. And you are leading people. And so I think having co-founders is really helpful for that, because hopefully, like, when you're not feeling so great about something, they are, or vice versa. And so you don't want to be at risk of not being able to manage your own psychology.
Yeah.
So that's the support group that
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be a co-founder, but I think typically it is, because they're there from day one. But obviously, like, your first hires or just anyone at the company. But I think, managing your own psychology by yourself is very hard. So.
Yeah. Also, I heard their founders saying, like, being a founder is like the loneliest job.
Yeah. And so it's less lonely with co-founders. But I mean, I personally haven't felt that way, but certainly I think it just goes to say that, like, people, it's not easy, and there is always going to, it may be like really good 99% of the time, but the most important days are the days that you don't feel like, doing what you have to do, and you have to figure out a way to do it on those days.
I think this is a great question and answer right now, because Jason, you live in the States, right? And I feel like the entrepreneurial mindset is a lot more mature if you're in Silicon Valley. Like, it's like funny that Karen said that quote, because it's true. In Hong Kong, Singapore, people do feel a bit lonelier because it's not as accepted. It's not as easy. Here in the Bay Area, I think you could go to any coffee shop and people are ready to start something right now. I'm going to leave Google right now if I can. Right? Exactly. But in Hong Kong, it's like, I think I'm going to stay at HSBC a little bit longer and see how this idea really percolates, right? And so that loneliness and the distancing between a co-founder might be stretched out a bit more than there are in certain pockets in the States, right?
Absolutely. And I would say, like, Asia is awesome, and we go there all the time, especially in crypto. I think Asia is stronger in many ways than the US. But I would say, like, for founders, like, make a sabbatical or make a journey to Silicon Valley and spend some time there, because the rate of learning is so high, and you're just going to get a different perspective on things.
Great.
Awesome. Okay, so what is the worst piece of advice you ever received? Since you're talking about, like, there's so many mentors in your life, have they given you anything that you're like, maybe not?
I would say it's sort of a variant of a way of thinking, which is, I think that, like, people that give the advice of have a backup plan are well-intentioned. And I'm not saying have no idea of what you would do if things fail. Like that's probably too dramatic. But I do think the way of thinking of like have a backup plan or have a plan B, C, D, E, or F, I think that way of thinking doesn't work super well in startups, because if you're thinking about starting a company and you're already thinking in probabilities, there's always going to be a point in the company where like the super rational, optimized, utilitarian thing to do is to quit, right? There's always a point where it's irrational to continue. But the thing is, you have to find it in yourself to continue, right? And
do you have Asian parents?
I do, yeah.
I can feel like they're not very traditional.
Yeah, I can feel like they're not very traditional. I've never heard anybody with Asian parents say, backup plan.
Traditional. They're pretty traditional.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, definitely took, I think that they just accepted that I was going to start a company, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're the rebel of the family.
You know, my older brother is a dermatologist, so he kind of walked so I could run, I feel like. So.
Nice. Thank you, older brother.
You got it covered.
Yeah.
We have a doctor in the family, so.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome.
The check mark's there. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a piece of advice there. Make sure you have an older sibling that's going to be a doctor or a lawyer or accountant, and then you can do whatever you like. That's amazing. Okay, let's get into some questions about your career in Web3. We always like to ask this question because it's everybody has a different answer. How did you get into Web3? Did you buy some Bitcoin? Did you buy an NFT? How did you get into it?
So I kind of got into it. The first ever exposure was around 2017. I started like mining Dogecoin. I, interact with ICOs. Neither of those like really worked out at all. Like
right.
it was like, it was just more interesting. I was like, oh, what is this? And then I kind of lost attention to it. And so I actually spent my career, like started off at DeepMinds, which is an AI lab.
Yeah.
So I was very focused on AI, but like two things really drew me into Web3 around 2020, 21. The first was my role at DeepMind was, and my interest in general is how do I take like super cutting edge abstract technical research and find ways to make it tangible, put it into the hands of consumers, make it like really delightful. And that's what I was doing at DeepMind, was taking AI research, like all these algorithms that were beating human players in chess, in Go, at StarCraft. Those are interesting research experiments, but like it's not like you're going to go and use those day to day. So how do we actually make that useful? And the pace was much slower in AI because you just have like 5 or 6 companies that have the scale in data and compute and capital to do research. Whereas, I was starting to read some white papers in crypto, and it's like these research papers were being put out. And then within months, like in the example of Uniswap, for example, you had a protocol that had millions of dollars being transacted, millions of users, and people are trying to fork it. They're trying to vampire attack it. They're trying to build on top of it. It's like this open, organic Darwinian ecosystem that anyone can participate in. And I found that really exciting. And the second part was really around my philosophy background. And I in university, I studied political theory. So I was interested to see like the sort of libertarian motivations behind the original, Bitcoin, Ethereum white papers. Unlike most technologies that just came out of a lab, like a professor doing research, this one was motivated by like a real problem. And then also around 2020, 21, like, as you guys know, DAOs, you look around, like everyone's talking about DAOs. And I was like, this is so different from the libertarian, messaging. It's like almost socialist in some ways. It's like, hey, if you like are part of a network, you should get some token. It's like a co-op, right?
Yeah.
And then also there's a lot of unbridled capitalism, I would say, in crypto, right? Like, and so it's like you have this political mirror where like no matter what you believe, you can go and find some vision of that future realized through blockchain technology. I found that very interesting. So that's what drew me to crypto in general, is like the combination of the intellectual and the sort of pragmatic like research elements. I found it just like a very exciting space.
Wow. So did you get your hands in to NFTs? So like what was your first NFT and what did you learn from it? And do you still—
Yeah, I actually had to go and find, because I kind of forgot. But my first ever NFT was a PO-op, actually, funnily enough. So it was a PO-op for one of the earliest lecturers of Balaji's Network States lecture series. So he actually, way before he published the book, he had a lecture series developing the ideas for the network state. And it was like in this weird like VR thing where like everyone was a circle and you like attended this lecture in VR. It was just like kind of a trippy experience, but I thought it was fun. And I like, Balaji's got a very interesting thinker. So that was my first ever NFT. What did I learn? I mean, obviously I learned stuff from what Balaji was saying, but more interesting was like this idea of like an on-chain identity that was portable. I think that's still one of the best examples of why crypto is important, is this composability, right? And so that's a big part of story. And that's a big part of, I think, the promise of crypto is like a global composable virtual computer.
Wow, I think that's the best answer we've had.
Yeah, it definitely is. Most people will bought a CryptoPunk or something.
I mean, I kind of wish I had I wish I had a CryptoPunk. I would trade my PO-op for a CryptoPunk.
Sure. But it seems like you learned more from this anyway. Probably, so that's good. Okay, so that leads to the last question in this segment. There's a lot of talk And this is interesting because I want to hear your opinion about it being in the Bay Area, because in Asia, Web3 is thriving, right? It's popping. But when you're in the States, and we were at Consensus recently in Austin, and it's a different vibe over there. So what is one misconception that you hear a lot, maybe from family or friends, about Web3 that you'd like to change?
I'll say this because I'm in San Francisco, and I worked in AI before. I think AI is one of the most impactful technologies of the next thousands of years. So I have nothing against AI, and we work with a lot of AI at Story. But I will say, being in SF, which is sort of like the epicenter of AI, like I think people like to say that crypto hasn't had its ChatGPT moment, and to me, I just feel like that's a little inaccurate, because maybe in the US, like crypto day to day is not as useful from a utility perspective, just because we have a functioning monetary system. Like we have like the global international reserve currency in the form of the US dollar. But if you talk to anyone in Argentina and ask them whether they'd rather have something that makes them a poem, or whether they'd rather have a job that allows them to get paid in a currency that isn't inflating at 500% per month or whatever it is, I think they'd go with the latter, right? And also, if you think about the history of money, fiat is, first of all, fiat is a relatively new concept. Like we used to have a gold standard, right? So like this idea of like money being backed by a monopoly on violence is relatively new. I don't think it's necessarily bad. Like monopoly on violence sounds bad, but fiat is useful. Like I'm sure most of us pay for most things in fiat. It's not like a horrible thing, but in the history of money, like it's a very, very novel and step function concept in the history of money, that we have the ability to create a store of value that is completely independent of any physical good, that is completely independent of any monopoly on violence. And that's never going to go away. So no matter what wars happen, what crises happen, I think this is sort of like a backstop. Like Bitcoin is a backstop for financial history. And that's like a step function shift, right? Like, so that is something that is certainly beyond a ChatGPT moment, I think. And also stable coins as, a means of payments for people in many, many countries that don't have the same monetary system as the US is also a step function. And many, many people in the world would rather have a stable coin than an LLM, right? And so I'm not underplaying the ChatGPT moment, but I do think the idea that crypto hasn't contributed anything in a short time is underplayed. And also I would like to say that like AI has been around for over 60 years, right? Like the idea of like a neural network, there's been many winters in AI. And when I first started working in AI, my dad was actually telling me not to, because there've been so many winters and crashes. And so it's like, there's been AI cycles for many decades, right? Yeah. And so when people say like, oh, it's been 15 years, what's happened? I would say like, look, it took 60 years to reach ChatGPT, right? So like, we're still early. And that's not, I don't think that's like a trivial thing to say. I think it is real in the history of technology. Like we are at the very early stages, and there have been very meaningful advancements from a technological perspective that have been made.
Absolutely. Great answer.
Well said.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Okay, so let's get into the real business segment. I'm sure a lot of people are interested in Story. And can you tell us a little bit more, like what are you building right now? What is this whole business is all about?
Yeah, so I think the motivation behind Story was basically a question, right? The question is, why aren't we living in, this is a great screenshot, why aren't we living in a new sort of renaissance, like a digital renaissance, right? Because if let's say you're a Martian, you come on to Earth and we tell you a couple facts. Like the first fact is that from your living room, you can create content and reach 10 million people and 100 million people in 24 hours, right? Like I can create a viral TikTok or whatever, and 10 million people can view it. That's global distribution from your bedroom. And then more recently, we have generative AI. So you can have, not only global distribution, but godlike tools, right? I can have a Hollywood studio in my bedroom. All I need to do is type in like a paragraph of what I want, and then I can press send. I can instantly reach 10 million people, right? So the idea that we have godlike creative tools and global distribution, those two facts, if you told an alien that, they would think, oh, cool. Like these people must be creating really great things. Like the most popular profession must be a creator. Like creators must be the richest people on earth. They must be the most powerful. But then you look around and that's not the case. Like even the top creators, so to speak, right? Like the most professionalized industry of creators is Hollywood probably, right? And they went on strike for 6 months in 2023, right, out of the year. And so clearly like things are breaking, even though we have what should be like a new renaissance. So that's kind of the question that we started with that Story. And what we're trying to do is update the intellectual property system. And so in the history of intellectual property, like we're basically still using the same pen and paper copyright laws that were invented with the printing press. And the printing press is very different from the internet, is very different from generative AI. So what we're trying to do is create essentially an internet native IP system that can move at the speed and scale of the internet. And we want to allow creators to be able to register their IP on Story and instantly be able to set the terms for how any program or any person on the internet can monetize and license their work. So I think like, if I have a work of art, I can put it on Story, and it's like this universal media library that any app can pull from, that any person can pull from. So if anyone wants to use my IP, they know exactly what the terms are. If someone wants to train an AI model on my voice, my artwork, my style, whatever it is, they know how much they need to pay. And so now we have like a global IP repository, almost like a Git for IP, that allows anyone to build like powerful next generation consumer apps on top. And in the same way that, DeFi created a new programmable money ecosystem with money Legos, we're trying to create the substrate to enable a new parallel creative ecosystem with IP Legos.
Amazing. Yeah, this is incredible. So, okay, so the next question for that then is, why are you building this? Why did you start it? Like, are you guys from an IP background? You're not a lawyer, right?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer.
Somebody's a lawyer in your group, though, right? And I saw an opportunity here, and it seems like A16Z believes in believing in what you guys are building, and this is something that is necessary in the ecosystem. But why? What's the moment where you're like, we got to build this, we got to make this happen?
Yeah, so I'll tell you my story, and then also it's important as co-founders. I'll tell you sort of my co-founders' backgrounds. But the interest that I had in the direction that led us to Story is, for me, like, I looked around, like I said, I was really interested in crypto. I actually quit my job at DeepMind with like knowing I wanted to build in the space, but not knowing what I wanted to do, actually. So I actually just had nothing to do for 3 months. And every day I woke up, just new adventure, just exploring things, building random stuff. And what I noticed was that almost everyone and all the talent and all the products and every solution was focused around finance, which is fine. I think finance is extremely exciting. But most things are around DeFi, right? And so it's like, how do we enable more yield, or how do we create new DeFi protocols, or how do we make better stable coin rails, these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, like, you look around, most people do not spend their lives on Charles Schwab or Robinhood. They don't spend their lives like looking at a stock chart. Maybe in crypto they do, but that's because that's the products that we built. Like we built products for traders. So there's a lot of traders in crypto, right? But there's no like real focus on what most people spend most of their time doing, which is consuming and creating culture. Like, that's arguably what makes us human, is a creative element and this creative touch. But I felt like blockchain had so much obvious potential to be a sort of generative force for creativity, but no one was really building anything that would enable that, right? And so that's, to me, what was exciting. And so I started looking around in like different consumer apps and consumer infrastructure, and that's the space I was exploring. And that's when I met SY, who's our co-founder and CEO, and he's a serial entrepreneur in the media space. And so he really and he wasn't in crypto at the time, so he really understood sort of the tangible problems. And I kind of had this intuition that like we need to use blockchain to build creative infrastructure. So kind of that's how we started the company, is this idea that blockchains and the properties that they have a lot to offer creativity, but either like the people in the space hadn't been creatives themselves, or most of the energy was focused on DeFi. And so that's kind of how we got started with thinking through Story.
Amazing.
Well, that's a great story. That's a great story about Story. Well, I'm also interested in like, because you've been building this for a while, like, have you had like one lesson that you learned so far building this? Because maybe you guys are all new into the IP and understanding like how IP works, or is there like a use case that you guys feel like it's really inspiring?
I would say the one lesson is stick to your principles and stick to your vision. One of the things about Story is that we actually we spent like, I think, a year like really figuring out the core product direction, which is really a year well spent. But one of the things that I think we learned is that, especially in crypto, and this is probably a good thing, but like, it's moving very quickly. There's a lot of different narratives. Like, people get excited about different things, and one day like RWAs are super hot, another day AI is super hot, another day NFTs are super hot, whatever, right? Like, there's all these interesting things, and that's not to say that's bad. It's probably a good thing that people are like excited about different things, but it's really important, I think, for founders, especially, to stay the course and remember why they started the thing in the first place. And that's actually, it's a little counterintuitive, but like, you should realize that like most projects, especially most successful startups, are decade-long journeys, and you need to have conviction in one idea for a decade, right? Otherwise, be an investor or do something else, because you have to have that single-minded focus. And so I think the best example of this is NVIDIA. No one was talking about NVIDIA 10 years ago, really, right? Like, it was more like a gaming company. And that had been 20 years in, right? NVIDIA is now 30 years in, and it's now Jensen Huang, like, they're signing people's shirts and stuff. But like, for 30 years, this guy was just so focused on doing what he's doing, and he stayed in his own lane, right? He didn't go into mobile. He made a bet on what was called like scientific computing at the time. That's not what we call machine learning. Like people thought he was stupid, right? So I think, especially in crypto, it's like a narrative driven space, right? Like stay the course, realize it's a 10-year journey, and build what you wanted to build in the first place.
Yeah.
So how big is the team right now?
Yeah, so the team is currently around 30. We may grow, up to 40 by the end of the year. So it's kind of like a medium-sized company. It's a fun size to be.
Nice. That's a good size.
Yeah.
If you go over 100, that'll be another level.
Yeah, that's gonna be
Well,
crazy. I don't know about
that kind of goes to my next question. You've raised enough money to hire more than 100 people. I'm looking at your investor list here, which is very impressive, and you can see where the founders are from. I think, right? You've got Hashed, right? You've got from Korea. You've got the chairman of Hive on your cap table here. You've got two small fish, and you've got the CEO of Dapper Labs, the Canadian angle. Maybe can you talk a little bit about, how do you talk to these investors, and what is the pitch like to them about what you're building? Because all of these are obviously Web3 crypto companies, so it's probably not a very big jump for them to understand it. But maybe you can explain a little bit about what was the hook you think that got them interested to invest in what you guys are building.
To me, like the sort of, to be completely honest, like what I just told you is what we tell them. I think the most important thing is like we are building what we think is an epoch defining technology. And the important thing is that we're very focused on building infrastructure. We're very focused on being the enabling layer, right? So we stay true to our vision, and we're building for a very long term. And when we talk to investors, we present a very long term roadmap, right? It's not like in 5 months we're going to like go to mainnet and then we don't really know what's going to happen afterwards. It's very much a long term vision, and it's the same vision that I just shared with you. I think things that investors like, they like the team, they like the experience that we have across. We have, our CTO was the VP of engineering at Harmony. Our head of ecosystem was the ecosystem lead at Flow. We have a lot of great, veterans in Web3. We also have, serial entrepreneurs in Web2, my experience at DeepMind. So we have this like creative synthesis on the team that I think is very rare and unique, and one thing I'm very proud of. And then also we have this long-term vision. And like I said, like we're pretty differentiated from the perspective of we're focused on consumer, we're focused on AI, we're focused on IP. We've been focused on those things before like AI was hot. We've been focused on consumer, even though most things are DeFi, right? Like, so I think there is an element of like a really strong team with a unique mix of Web2 and Web3 that's focused on an issue for a very long time that, has been somewhat neglected, I would say, in the space, and in trying to create like almost open up a new avenue for crypto, the creative avenue, right? That hasn't fully been explored.
Exactly. Great. Very exciting. Very interesting. Okay. Next question. I'm bringing it back, Karen. Bringing back the alpha drop. What is the alpha? What is something that you can share with us that you're building that you want to tell everybody listening in right now?
Sure. So I think one of the things that people always ask, and that I want to like clarify and also reveal a little bit, is what is Story from a technical perspective, right? And so far what we've really debuted and focused on, and this is part of our strategy, right, is let's build a smart contracts protocol that allows people to register IP. But actually, like one thing that we haven't really talked too much about that is, something that we're just now talking about and releasing and opening to the public, is that we're building our own layer one to really be, like we said, like we want to be the programmable layer of the internet. We want to be where, in our vision, is that every piece of content on the internet, not just in Web3, whether it's Netflix or TikTok, is registered on Story. And that requires a very custom architecture. So we sort of built out a solution from the ground up, including layer one, the smart contracts on top, and then applications being built on top of our ecosystem.
Wow.
That really showcase the breadth of our vision and also the need for like a unique architecture. So that's something that we haven't really been vocal about, because we only want to reveal things when we're fully ready to show them. And we're very excited to kind of build that vision out in a vertical stack. When
do you think you're going to launch that?
So we are thinking around the end of the year, or maybe the early 2025. That we're still refining those timelines, but pretty soon, relatively.
Okay. Wow. Fantastic.
Wow, that's the next level. So we're going into the last question. I think might have a lot to say for this one, so let's spend some time on it. What is the future of the IP industry in Web3? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
I would almost argue that the future of the IP industry in Web3 is the future of IP. Like, I just don't see another way that IP can move forward as an asset class without Web3, right? And so 2 angles on this. One is that the business model of created content now is really, really difficult. And that's why you're seeing all these strikes, is because put yourself in the shoes of a Netflix executive. You are, let's say you create a brand new show, you spend millions of dollars creating it, you put it on Netflix, and all of a sudden you're competing with all of your own shows. And also you're competing with Amazon Prime and Apple TV. You're competing with Hulu. You're competing with TikTok. And you're competing with Wattpad. And you're competing with Sleep, right? So what happens is that attention is super, super valuable. But AI and the internet have made it really easy to create content. So you have this massive, massive super abundance of content and diminishing attention, right? Or at least attention stays the same. And what happens in that environment, it becomes very competitive. And so you need to spend a lot of money on advertising in order to get noticed, in order to get that attention. So let's say you generate $1 of revenue as a Netflix executive from that show. Like, you're putting 99 cents into advertising to compete against Netflix, your other shows, also Hulu, also Amazon Prime. And that means only 1 cent of that can go to the creators, right? That's just sort of the business model of creativity. So the way to solve that is to create network effects around IP. Because think about Facebook never really had to spend money to attract users, because as each marginal user joined Facebook, they advertised Facebook, they evangelized it, Facebook itself became more valuable. And so can IP become a platform? Can IP have network effects? That's what we're doing at Story, which is allowing creators to give rights and upside in their creative works to their community. And so instead of, you're creating fan fiction on this website far off from the core IP, you are actually not just a fan creating fan fiction, you're actually contributing to the canon. And if that canon generates revenue, you also generate revenue, right? So you're aligning incentives, and those people are going to become evangelists. They're going to grow your IP, and you're going to get network effects around IP. So it's going to be, every IP is going to look a little bit like Roblox, right? That's kind of what we think. So that's one angle. The other angle is around AI, which is, and this is, so blatantly obvious, this massive issue where recently you had the Scarlett Johansson debacle where people are saying, okay, Scarlett Johansson's voice was being copied in ChatGPT. You have New York Times suing OpenAI. You have people creating the Drake and the Weeknd remix on SoundCloud going to #1. Obviously, it's just like AI voice, right? You have Harry Potter in the style of Balenciaga, Harry Potter in the style of Wes Anderson. You have, these are cool, right? Like, I actually think these are awesome, and they should continue. And they're inevitable. So you can't play cease and desist whack-a-mole with the internet. You can't go to every YouTube video that has Harry Potter and shut it down. That's impossible. That's like, but we're in this new Napster moment where there's all this creativity, but there's no way for creators to get value or for the people remixing to get value. Right now, it's a total lose-lose situation where if you're J.K. Rowling, you're not generating revenue when people create YouTube remixes. As a remixer, you might have spent a lot of time on that high-quality Harry Potter remix with AI, but you're also probably getting a cease and desist, and you're not getting any revenue. So instead of this lose-lose situation, we need to transform that into a win-win. And that's what Story's trying to do is, if you're J.K. Rowling, you put your IP on Story. Anyone can create remixes of it using AI or any other tool, and they can generate revenue, and so can you. And that's going to create that network effect. And it's also going to solve the problem that we have right now where there's no underlying monetization scheme for AI at all.
Now, do you think J.K. Rowling will put Harry Potter on the blockchain for people to remix?
The thing about creative shifts is that it's never the incumbents that adopt it, right? So think about YouTube. Like, YouTube did not go to Steven Spielberg and ask him to create a.
They just did it.
Now they are, because now Steven Spielberg needs YouTube more than YouTube needs.
Yeah,
YouTube.
right.
And so
right.
What happened is, like, how does YouTube start? It's just like these people, the 99.9% of people that were neglected by Hollywood. It's always like that. Snapchat took the people that didn't want to be on Facebook anymore. And so it's always like a new class of people that use these creative tools and harness them, and then they become Mr. Beast, and then eventually the incumbents join, right? So I think the story is the same thing.
So you're saying that it's not going to be Harry Potter; it's going to be something new that's going to go for this, right?
I'm not saying if J.K. Rowling sees this and wants to use Story,
oh yeah, she's invited for sure.
You're totally invited. I'm not saying no, obviously, but it's unlikely, right? It's always unlikely that the
hugely
people
unlikely,
at the top of the food chain are going to go and try something new. But I think there's, like, how many people do you know that have a lawyer? Like, those people are the only people that can license their IP right now.
Right.
And so there's going to be so many people that just need access to this technology, and they're going to be the ones that play around with it.
What do you think of Pudgy Penguin's Overpass platform?
It's really sick, and we've had many conversations with them about it, and hopefully there'll be some exciting announcements around that soon.
Oh, that's another alpha drop right there, I'm sure.
And I'm also curious, like, what type of industry do you think this would become more of a use case? Is it the music industry? Is it the Hollywood, or is it publication?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So story as a technology, we're agnostic to medium. So you can upload a file, text file, you can upload video, you can upload MP3. Personally speaking, I think that in the long run, multimedia franchises are the way to go. And I think that that's just the inevitable outcome of the internet is that you're going to have people creating maybe like a prose world Bible that lays out the characters, the plots, and then people are going to add images that show what these characters look like. And then you're going to have music that goes along with the stories. And I think what story enables is like you have these IP Lego blocks and you can put them together in different ways to create these multimedia experiences. So you're not limited to one medium.
That's what the promise at the beginning of NFTs was. I remember like a lot of projects came out that said, here are all the stuff. There was actually a project called Lore. It just had like pieces of a story that you could make up your own stuff. But I think it was too hard to understand how to do it. And I don't know the actual mechanics of it. But I guess what you're saying is a lot easier. So say we have I have a captains. I don't know if you know much about the Memeland project, but we have these characters called captains. And I think everybody owns their own captain. So I'm going to create a story around my captain and I'm going to put it on story. And then anybody can license it out. And if they make, so they don't have to buy the NFT, they can just use my my captain to do whatever they want, a comic or a cartoon and things like that. And then if that thing gets sold, and then so I have no say in what happens to what they're making, or do I get a, like, you know, as a licensing, I know a little bit about the licensing business, right? There's usually a licensor and a licensee relationship. The licensee still has to show the licensor what they're making and get approvals before they go into mass production, whether a toy or a t-shirt or whatever like that. How does it work in the digital world though, like that?
It's a great question. So nothing about story precludes you from doing that, right? Like obviously there are going to be licensing interactions where you're going to want to have a conversation. And we think that like a lot of apps building on us have built that into the platform, right? So it's like you have a chat feature, you can engage with people, but also I think, you know, there are also more scale. We want to really make it as frictionless as possible to license. So in the licensing terms, we have this programmable IP license that we built. That's a real world license. And you can stipulate, like, you can use a drop-down menu, so you don't have to like come up with it yourself. Many different common content like sort of filters, right? So you could say you don't want anyone to create pornography. If this is very common, you want anyone to create hate speech out of this. So you can dictate those terms, and so you can give guidelines. And some projects building a story are even playing around with more interesting ways to put brand guidelines on chain, right? And so actually, like that's just complete innovation on top of story. That's not something we thought of ourselves, but there are sort of efforts being made to reduce the friction. And obviously sometimes you're just going to have a conversation. That's totally fine. So you can always do that as well.
So go ahead, Karen.
Sorry, is it possible to like backtrack like what's been made based on the IP that I'm like registering now? Or is it something that like, you know, like things that just going to create in the future or from now on?
It's more about what's happening in the future. That's why, you know, we have some people that are uploading existing IPs, but what's more exciting are like brand new programmable IPs that are like purely crypto native or like story native, because they don't have any legal obligations to existing, like let's say you're uploading Harry Potter, like that's going to be difficult because you made 10,000 different licensing deals already. So how do you represent that, right? Whereas if you started something new, like you mint it on story, and all of a sudden, you know, everything that happens afterwards you can track, and everything is like all of the law is code, and you don't have to worry about, is there some random legal agreement I made 10 years ago that's going to affect this? So that's kind of, I think, more powerful. But of course, we can do the hard work of trying to translate existing IPs on chain.
Yeah. Can you share with us anything that you're working on right now in terms of it being original IP coming to story right now, like being built on it?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll have to come on this again, because I mean, we have some really big Hollywood creators building brand new.
Okay, so they are. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, you don't have to tell us their names or anything, but they are building something now directly. Because I also am a part of this other thing called Atom. Have you heard of it? ADIM, right?
Yeah, we know the founders.
Robert McElhenney, the guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he started this NFT, you know, Web3 writing room, right, where everybody's writing. So it sounds very similar to what you're doing. But it's not. It's like a group of people are writing a story, and then they all get shares out of it through some sort of crypto.
Right. And just to clarify, like I think what Adam is doing is really epic, and we talked to them. And for us, like story, we're more of infrastructure layer, so we're not really in the business of building apps. So we see apps like Atom, and they had to do so much legal work, how do you, like, when someone contributes to Atom and then Atom, the IP makes money, like, how do you
so you're the infrastructure
We're the
underneath an
substrate
Atom
that makes anyone able to create Atom without needing to raise money.
amazing, got it.
I think like what you just talked about really inspired me in terms of like, I feel like if music industry or music labels are able to use this, like that's like to their best benefit, because basically they're legal. Like they spend so much time on like doing legal licenses, and like their whole legal department is like basically doing all of this thing, which you can then replace.
Right.
So yeah, that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I remember working in the licensing industry in like Sony Pictures or Marvel. They wouldn't start looking at your deal unless it was $10,000 US, right? Because that's how much it costs their lawyers to start looking at the contract, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like there's already a threshold that maybe somebody really creative had a great idea, can't even get involved because they're like, yo, it's too expensive already at the beginning, and they won't even look at it unless it's got that special number at the top, right? I mean, I'm sure we can talk about this for hours. I think this is a lot more stuff. So yeah, definitely, we'd love to have you come back on when you can announce something that you're working on, so we can talk about it together and see how it works. I think this is a very important technology that you guys are bringing into Web3.
Absolutely, yeah. Appreciate the time here, and yeah, it was a really fun conversation.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Jason. And if you want to follow Jason J. Zhao on Twitter, on X, and also follow us, GM Show Official, and our host. And we will see you again next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, guys.